You are wasting a ton of money in your business. And during today's training, I'm going to show you 15 ways to stop that so you can actually increase your bottom line, make a lot more profit that you can use to reinvest to grow the business. But most importantly, so you can be able to take money out and have the financial freedom you really want to have. So during today's training, we're talking about over 15 different ways that you can cut expenses, make changes in your business, and improve your bottom line. We're going to talk about things most entrepreneurs don't even think about. We're going to talk about how to maximize on what you're doing with your employees, on expenses that you forget about that are eating up a lot of your profits. And I'm going to show you a lot of ways that are turnkey to be able to radically increase the profits in your business. By the end of this training, you are going to know exactly what you need to do and be able to start doing it to put more money in your pocket and have more money to reinvest into growth. So we got a lot to cover. Let's dive in. So look, is your business wasting money? Yeah, it is. Let me tell you, here's how you know. If you say, look, we make money, but we reinvest it for growth, and you have very little profit actually in your bank account, or you're not able to pull a lot of money out of the business, you're not able to give yourself the financial freedom that you'd like to have, and you're using the excuse that you're reinvesting all the profits back into the business, it's a good way of knowing that you are not doing this. You are wasting money. You are not maximized on your actual profit. So if you save money, you don't have to go get money from, angel investors. You don't have to, borrow money to be able to do the things you want to do. You've got the money in the bank to actually do it. You're not out, selling $1 worth of the value of your company to a crowdfunder or to a private investor or venture capitalist or angel investor, because again, you have enough money in your actual bank account to be able to buy the things that you really need to buy. So when you have your profits right, you don't have to go get as much outside money to be able to make things work. You can actually rely on your profits to make things work as well. Now, when we look at expenses, there's a lot of things that you don't think about that you can actually cut that you probably can cut. And there's a lot of different kinds of expenses any business can be able to fine tune, keep up with, reduce, cut all together that you might not even be thinking about. And when you do this right, you literally can save hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year. And I don't say that from like an outside perspective. Like, this is something very real that we went through in COVID. And to tell you the amount we saved, it's absurd. It was like over $1.5 million we were able to cut from a world where we didn't think that we had anything to cut. So how's that even possible? How does that work? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to show you really realistically on how to do in your business during today's training. So let's talk about salaries. Well, first of all, you never want to ask a team member to reduce their salary. Okay. As a matter of fact, sometimes, in a rough situation like COVID, we even went to some team members and said, look, we think we need to move you to part-time right now, or even furlough in some situations till we figure out what's going on. So sometimes if an economy dramatically changes or a situation asks for it, you might need to do that. But you never want to go to employees and ask them to take a pay cut. Okay. It's not good on morale. And it's not good, even if it does improve your bottom line. Now, when it comes to salaries, we use Glassdoor, and you should ask yourself what you use to figure out what your salaries are supposed to be. Because as your business gets bigger, what you start running into is that more of your team members want to get paid more money. And if you don't have a baseline to base where they should be paid based on their position, it really becomes problematic. So even though you shouldn't cut your salaries, save money, you should know why you're paying your team what you're paying. You should look at something like Glassdoor or whatever your system may be to figure out what team members should be getting paid. And then you need to decide where you are on that scale of paying them. So for example, Netflix goes out of their way to really hire the absolute top tier talent. They have a really interesting strategy. What they do is they look at the tier of what somebody gets paid, the range, and they pay above the top of that range to get their top talent. Then they tell their team members, hey, I want you to go out and take any interview of any company that wants to poach you and get you to work for them. And if they're able to offer you more incentives or more money, come back. Let's have that conversation, because that can help all Netflix employees if we start rolling that out, or we can make those changes for you as well. So it's interesting about them is that, first of all, they find the top tier of what they pay and pay above that. Then they tell their team members, we welcome you to go out and take interviews. You can even take time from work to go to those interviews. We just want the feedback of how that went to make sure that what we're paying is in line with what you should be paid. And the same with benefits as well. So again, keeping an eye on salaries is important, but it's not that you actually want to come in and start cutting people's pay. But training can definitely help. So for example, what kind of training do you have for a sales team? If you have a sales team, or what kind of training are you going to have for a sales team? Think about it. Even improving a salesperson's closing percentage by 1% or 2% could be a dramatic improvement to your bottom line. Think about that. Because if a salesperson gets X amount of leads, 100 leads, and they close 20 of those leads, well, you already spent the money to get the 100 leads. So if you got them to close 21 leads or 22 leads instead of 20, that's directly to your profit. It's directly to your bottom line because you already spent the money for the employee that's making the sale. You've already spent the money to bring the leads in the door. You're just closing a higher percentage. So again, there's a lot of things you should be doing with at least keeping track with KPIs of your team members or ways to measure their actual performance to see how they are performing. If you've ever had somebody surprisingly leave your company, well, you're not managing them properly. You're not watching them. There should be metrics you're looking at with every team member to really know if they're performing the standard or if their performance is dropping off, and to give them a motivation and incentive to then actually get better and better. So we tell our team members we want them to make more calls, for example, on the sales team. Hey, you made X amount of calls last month. What's your goal for this month? And we hope their goal is always a little bit better than what it was the month before. And that little bit better, even if it's 1 call or 2 calls a month, even if they make 2 more calls a month, well, then guess what? By the end of that month, if they increase that by 2 calls a month every month, well, then that could be an extra 24 calls that they're making in that year. And who knows how much money that could be. Okay, so again, not necessarily cutting salaries, but having metrics that you're looking at to keep an eye on. Is your team performing? Making sure you have a system of exactly how they should be paid. Those type of things are a big deal when it comes to maximizing what you're actually able to get out of your team member. Now, outsourcing is another way. It might be expensive, okay? Small businesses pay thousands of dollars to outsource, sometimes many more. But this is something very interesting that we learned in COVID. What we learned was we had positions internal that we never really should have had as positions. Then when COVID hit and we pulled back like a lot did and said, we just need to reassess, what we realized was we had positions that were not crucial to the organization, that we were paying a lot of money on, that never should have been internal positions. And here's why. When they're internal, you can't reduce their salary. That is a fixed cost. Well, it's not really a fixed cost, but it's like a fixed cost. But if it was somebody we were outsourcing that work to, we could pull that work back and say, we're going to hold off on sending you outsourcing work for right now until we get an idea what's going on. So let me give you an example. We had a UX UI guy, phenomenal guy, Steven. He was awesome. But the reality is he was designing our website. He was doing front-end development design that we didn't really necessarily need done. So when COVID hit, now all of a sudden we have this huge salary and we can't reduce his salary. So we're stuck with that salary. So unfortunately, we ended up letting him go during COVID. But now we were able to outsource that work to somebody else, where if we ever want to pull back, we can say, look, we're going to hold off on sending you more work. And now we're not out that money. So there's some positions that are just better to outsource that you don't really need internal. Another example for us is SEO. We looked at having somebody come in and do SEO internal, having SEO be done external. And what we decided was we would rather have SEO done external for many reasons, including it was just as cost effective as hiring somebody internal. But the other reason is that if we ever need to pull back or reduce what we're spending there, we can do so without having to reduce the salary or workload of a team member. So there are just positions that you absolutely need to have external in your organization and not internal. And the fact that you having them internal could cost you more money, and it's harder to make adjustments on the fly and pull back your spending in situations like COVID where you may need to. Now, again, outsourcing is another thing to think about, is who are you outsourcing to, or who are your actual team members? Meaning that, we have a lot of team members from the Philippines. We have over 25 team members from the Philippines. And when we first started, my business partner, Megan, and I, she hadn't had a lot of experience with outsourcing. I did. I was used to building businesses from the ground up and bootstrapping, and I knew the importance of Filipino workers, for example, at $4 or $5 an hour versus an American employee at $15 or $20 an hour. I'm not telling you not to hire American. We have a ton of American employees, like 50-something plus American employees on our team, right? But the reality is there are jobs that are just not important enough to give to one of those team members. It's not something we would spend $15, $20, $25 an hour to get done, but we'll gladly spend $4 or $5 an hour to get done. So for example, I have a manual metrics guy, and all this dude does is go get me manual metrics and figures when we can't get them other ways. So if I want to know, for example, how many people are on this Facebook Live, and I want to know every person and where you come from. Right now we're using StreamYard, and we're streaming to Facebook, a bunch of Facebook groups, Facebook channels, YouTube, all these places. Well, where are all the viewers coming from? Well, Muhammad goes out and he goes through every single our YouTube channel, the Facebook groups, and actually tracks every live stream where everybody's coming from. Very good information. We can use that from time to time. But we're not going to spend $20 an hour for somebody to get that. We will gladly spend $4 an hour for that. So when it comes to outsourcing, you have to really think about, what positions need to be internal, what positions are external, and you need to make really good use. And this isn't really necessarily outsourcing, but you need to really figure out where your team members come from, because there's a lot of places like Upwork or Fiverr where you can get work done very cheap without bringing somebody internal. And if you want to bring somebody internal, you can do it at $4 or $5 an hour. We have like over 20 full-time team members from the Philippines on our team that handle all different types of roles. Sarah has been with me for 10 years. She's been with me for multiple businesses. So a lot of our team members have been with us 6, 7, 8, 10 years. No drama, really affordable to hire. They absolutely are so appreciative to have jobs with American employers. So again, some things to think about. And you also, if you are going to outsource, need to think about communication as well. Meaning, how are you going to communicate with them? We use Slack, for example, versus Skype. So you've got to figure out exactly what you're going to do to communicate with these team members as well. And God bless us. Is it wise to relocate your funds to marketing if you're a startup? Yeah, well, where you're spending your money, and we'll talk about this today, you have to avoid waste. But again, putting your money into marketing, especially proven campaigns, makes a lot of sense. And again, we're going to talk about this today because you have to, if you're going to put your money in marketing, you have to avoid waste. And I'm going to talk about avoiding waste. And Ebony, thanks for bringing John into the stream. I appreciate that as well. So hiring the wrong person can be very expensive as well, okay? So you've got to figure out how to hire the right people. I'll tell you how we do it. We use a service called Preview, HR, Prevue-HR. You don't have to use Preview. You can use whatever you want to use. But we use Preview because there's a personality assessment as part of the hiring process. And what we found is that by tracking all the personality profiles of our team members, we have clearly seen trending of what types of personalities work better in certain positions than others. And when we have one position where all of a sudden somebody turns over and we look at it, we say, okay, what happened there? Well, their personality probably wasn't a good fit for the actual position. So you need to make smart hires. And the reality is all the science on this shows we suck at hiring people. Like, that's what the science shows. We come in with these preconceived biases. And then what happens is we kind of go with that bias. I don't know about you, but this happened to me. I've looked at a survey before and go, oh, I love this person. And then I get on the interview and the interview wasn't that great, but I have stuck in my head that I love the person so much that I probably gave them more credit for a good interview than they really deserved. That's what happens with these biases, and you have to be really careful. One of the ways to do it is a service like Preview, or if that's too expensive, go with any of these other type of services that offer some kind of personality assessment involved, so you get a better idea of the person you're hiring, and you can get a feel for what kind of people actually fit better in other positions. And again, don't forget about training. As we talked about training with sales team members, a little bit of training, increasing close percentage goes a long way. So make sure that you've incorporated some kind of consistent training, because of all the team members you'll hire, getting a little bit better performance from each one of them is a dramatic improvement to how they work. It means you hire less people. It means you get more from the people you're actually hiring. Now, another way to hire better is to hire employees on a trial basis. You might do that. Hey, we give them jobs before we hire them. So if we're going to have them do list building, then we'll even pay them. We'll pay you to build a list of 10 of these people to see how you do. So there's a trial run, and we don't mind paying them for that trial run. But what we do is we don't usually hire them on a trial basis. We give them trial projects to do. So whether you hire somebody on a trial basis or give them trial projects to do before hiring, some kind of trial makes sense to make sure that you have the right person. You have to let the lower performance or the poor performers go, unfortunately. We hear this a lot. You hire A players. And I'll try to think of the wording of this, but I've never found people that said that they were too slow to fire or that they were too fast to fire somebody, right? Everybody I've ever talked to has said that they were too slow to fire somebody. They should have fired them sooner. I've never met somebody that fired somebody too quickly. Well, I cannot say never met somebody that fired somebody too quickly, but took 2 steps to fire somebody and let somebody go too quickly, and then eventually realized that, they should have waited longer to let them go. So in our world, do they live up to our core values? If they're a good reflection of our core values, we hire by our core values and fire by our core values. Are they a good fit for our culture? And I'll tell you why that's smart. When you look at Credit Suite, we've had over 200 team members in the time that we've been here. And of that, we've had less than 5 people ever leave. Our turnover is absurdly low compared to any industry you compare to, like less than 5 people of over 200. And of the 5 that left, really good reasons. Like one of our guys, Ryan, went to run a phenomenal opportunity to go run a sales team. Our buddy Dave, he went to work for his brother to help in his brother's company. Okay. You know, Kat, who used to do all of our training, she went to create a private school for challenge kids. Phenomenal opportunity. We do a lot financially to support what she's doing. So they left for very good reasons. People are going to leave. But the bottom line is, if you take care of your team members and you hire people and you pay them on the higher end of what they should be paid, and you're making sure that you're doing regular interviews with them. How are they? Are they doing what they want to do in the company? Are they in the position they want to be in the position in the company? Where do they want to grow to? Where do they want to go in the company? If you're doing those kind of things, then you have a really good chance of keeping your top people. But look, you have to be honest with yourself. And unfortunately, and we kind of went through this in COVID when I said, look, we cut like $1.5 million from our bottom line. Here's how we did it. We had to be honest with ourselves. And people that really weren't performing at a really high A level, unfortunately, kind of had to let them go. And that's hard because we have people that worked for us for 6, 7, 8 years. And I'm really big on loyalty. So that's a very hard thing to do. But the bottom line is that if everybody else is performing here and somebody else in a position is performing here, you know, no matter what you like about that person, they're still here and the other people are here, and you have to really evaluate that. So really a type of player is somebody that understands the role and that goes and does it. They don't really need to be micromanaged. They're the ones coming up with new ideas in their job and position. They're the ones coming up with suggestions of how to do that job better, how to get better results. They don't need to be prompted by you to do it. If you have A players that not only completely do great in their position, but own it, dominate it, and are constantly coming up with new ideas, suggestions, and ways to improve that position and improve the results they get, that is an A player. And sometimes you have to ask yourself and be honest of whether or not that's the person that you have or not. So when we look outside of team members, we also look at software. So one of the things that we do is every 6 months, we call every one of our software companies and we negotiate. Every 6 months, we do this. And I got to tell you that when you look at things like Zendesk, when you look at things like Gong, when you look at things like Infusionsoft, we have some of the lowest rates of anybody you're ever going to talk to. The reason is that we use these softwares a lot. And we call them and we work with them and we negotiate with them every 6 months. And sometimes that negotiation is, hey, you need to pay us 6 months in advance. You need to pay us a year in advance. Perfect. At the end of the year, that's a perfect time to do it so you don't have to pay taxes. Sometimes it's just because you asked, you get them reduced. But I will tell you, I can name at least 3 to 5 softwares where you're going to have a really hard time finding anybody else out there that gets more from those software and pays less than we do, because every 6 months we actually look and negotiate that software. But you need to have a list of this. As your company gets bigger, you're going to have multiple people going out and buying the same software. So somebody comes in and uses Zoom. Somebody else needs to use Zoom in a whole other department. They buy Zoom, and now you've got multiple licenses to Zoom as an example. This happens all the time. So having one log of software that you're using now, even if you're just small and getting started, start a log of software. So then that way, if I go, oh man, I really need the software, it sees the visitors that come to my website. And then I look, I go, oh, that's awesome. We already have that software. You save that expense. Otherwise, you could be paying for many years on softwares that you don't know, or paying many years or that you don't use. You could be paying for many years on software you don't use. And we had that exact same thing happen with an Infusionsoft application. We realized that for years, we've been spending money on something we hadn't used for years. So you've got to keep an eye on that. You've got to keep a log of your softwares. You've got to make sure you're not double dipping and getting 2 softwares that you don't need because different divisions. You need to negotiate every 6 months on the cost of those softwares to see if you can reduce the cost as well. Okay. And you need to look at your expenses on your tax returns, et cetera, on a regular basis to make sure that you don't have tools, including software, that you really just don't need. It might be overkill. It might not be something you need at all. You've got to be honest with yourself about the software you really need or not. When we went through COVID and we did this, so we went to team members, you know, it was interesting because a lot of them were like, yeah, we don't really need that. Nah, it's not something we really use. We were able to cut thousands and thousands of dollars a month from software and tools that we liked, but we weren't really using to their full potential. Now, if you're getting value from this, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the love button. That's all I ask through the whole stream. But I think you're going to get a lot of good actionable information here. And if you are, then make sure you hit the love button, hit the like button. That way we can get more people in here and help more entrepreneurs save money. And that way put more money in their pocket at the end of every year. So location, location, location. What COVID has shown a lot of people is that you don't need a physical office to run a business. So if you look at Credit Suite, we are 100% virtual company. We are completely from home. Okay. But here's the deal. We do, I don't know, 15 million in sales. I mean, we're pretty high up there, like well over 8 figures in sales. And yet we have a home-based business. Now, was it like that? Last year, we had 2 offices. Think about the expense of 2 offices. We had 2 offices. We had the furniture in them. We had the rent. We had the utilities and refrigerators and food and office supplies. It was a tremendous amount of money to manage 2 offices. But with COVID, we realized that was more of a liability than an asset. Because what if one person gets sick and takes out the whole location? Everybody's sick now in that one location. Not to mention that our ability to hire was hindered because now we can only hire people around this office or only hire people around this office. And here's the deal. We didn't get any better performance from our team members. So one of our office was salespeople. Well, we had salespeople we hired virtually well before. Those virtual sales members outperformed our sales members that were in office. As a matter of fact, it was worse because the people in the office would talk and gossip and they would go outside and smoke and hang out and socialize and they would get less work done. So what we found was we never had positions that worked out of or in the office and got better performance than out of the office. Matter of fact, when we went and made everybody virtual, all the people that were in the offices, all of the actual results and improvement went up. I'm not saying it's the same with your organization, but have you tested it? Have you looked at it to see? A lot of us think that we need locations when we don't. Okay. And I was the one that said, we need a sales office that'll make our sales team better. It didn't. And then our COO said, we need an office up here for all of our operational people to come in. It's going to help camaraderie and it's going to perform better. It didn't. And so in the end, we were able to remove all of those expenses. So again, how many people do you have that work from home? Can you work from home? What other things can you do to reduce those expenses in your actual office? What are you spending on office supplies? What are you spending on food? What are you doing there that you're paying a lot of money on that you might be able to actually reduce? Okay. And Luby says, oh, you guys are freaking awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So again, you've really got to look at what you can, do you need a location? And again, you've got to look at what you're paying. Should you be paying that? Can you negotiate that? When we actually got PPP, as many did, we went to our landlord and said, we went out of the lease. And he said, we're not going to let you out of the lease. Here's the deal. We're going to give you a big chunk of cash that's the equivalent of like 4 or 5 months worth of rent. Okay, you can either take that or we're going to fight a battle to get out of this lease. It makes sense for you to just take the cash and then it gives you months to get somebody else in for a long-term lease. He took the deal. Okay, so again, being able to negotiate to get out of a lease, being able to negotiate to reduce the cost of a lease, looking at your current expenses in your location, these kind of things are really, really, really important. Okay. And again, do you cater all your meetings? Do you really have to? Do you need to bring coffee and food and everything to keep into those offices? Are these things that are even needed? Do you have to pay utilities? Can you choose your own appliances? Do you have energy efficient refrigerators and fluorescent lights? If you're supposed to pay the electric, again, all types of things to think about. The same with postage. Do you use a postage meter? Are you doing postage in a way where you can actually pay less money? Okay, because you're actually using a postage meter versus stamps. Does that save you time? Some things to think about. Business travel. A lot of us is reduced through COVID, but what's really necessary and not? Here's what's interesting through COVID. A lot of companies that their business was events. They traveled. You know what they figured out during COVID? We don't need to travel. We can do virtual events. All my friends are this way. Like every single one of them that did events now goes to me, oh my gosh, you are never going to believe this. We are now doing our events online. We don't need to travel. We've reduced all the expenses and we're getting better. People like it better. We're getting more people. More people are paying than they ever were offline. They'll never go back. Now they might do one big event a year instead of 5 small ones like they were, but the amount of time, the amount of money spent on travel didn't make sense. And we're the same way. We would pack up a team and go on the road to do an event, right? And then maybe we would make whatever in sales, 30 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand in sales. But when we look at the lost opportunity cost of taking those team members, putting them on planes, now we got salespeople that aren't selling. They're spending days traveling back and forth and sitting at an event. It didn't make sense. And I think a lot of us have figured that out. So how much travel is really necessary? How much of it can you get done without actually doing the traveling? How much are you spending on events and other things that you don't really need to be spending money on? As a matter of fact, you could probably do these things virtually and actually get better results. Some things to think about, okay? And do you have a documented expense policy? Does your team members know what they can spend and what they could spend it on? And are you tracking that? So at Credit Suite, everything I spend money on, I have to actually keep the receipt and I have to upload it to like my QuickBooks app and account for what it is, like what it's for. So if I go out to dinner on a business dinner to meet with a couple lenders, well, then I need to get that receipt and then I need to put the lender's name and upload it to QuickBooks. So it makes me accountable for every dime I'm actually spending. And I'm the CEO, right? I can kind of do whatever I want. I'm the CEO, but I don't do whatever I want. We set a precedent that everybody has to adhere to. So every expense is actually documented and we can look to make sure that those expenses actually make sense. I've talked to a lot of people where all of a sudden they realize that one or two team members were wasting insane amounts of money traveling and other things that they didn't know about because they weren't tracking it. Okay, I see those things happen all the time. And especially if team members know you're not tracking it, it just gives them too much flexibility to sometimes not make the best decisions. Okay, wasteful advertising and marketing. And this is one of the things that God bless 1234 from YouTube had come in and said. So he said, is it wise to relocate your funds to marketing if you're a startup? Well, it is if you're not wasting money, meaning that trying new ideas is okay if they work, but it's not where you want to spend a lot of your money. Now, Google has a way of doing this, and we use Google's model. And Google's model is a 70-20-10. And here's how it works. 70% of their money goes towards maintaining what's working now, exactly what they know works, exactly what runs Google. 20% is on short-term stuff, like over the next 5 years, initiatives they're getting off the ground and things they're putting money into. 10% are long shots, right? It's their driverless cars. It's the crazy projects that we constantly hear Google is working on. That's how they allocate their budget, 70-20-10. So that's how you have to look at, and this is how we actually spend money the same way on advertising and marketing and throughout our company. 70% of our marketing dollars goes to what we absolutely know works. We know it works. We've tested it. It works. We're putting more money into it because we're growing it. We're scaling it. Boom. That's something we know works. 20% is what we're trying on the short term that we think will work, but we're not 100% positive. So examples of those for us are 70% of our money goes to Facebook ads and Google ads. We've spent millions and millions of dollars over the years. We know it works. We know how to increase ad spend, get increased results. That's where most of our marketing dollars go. 20% is on experimental stuff. Right now, we're experimenting on Bing ads. We're experimenting on Core ads. Didn't even know you could do Core ads. You can. And we're experimenting with Bing ads. You should look into Bing. Because now that Microsoft owns LinkedIn, they're using LinkedIn's data to help you hyper-target on Bing like you can hyper-target on Facebook or Google. So 20% of our money is testing these other marketing avenues. We don't know if it'll work or not. We think it will, but we're just testing it in the short term. And then 10% is like down the road stuff. You know, we're putting money into stuff down the road that we're building an infrastructure to test sometime later. Influencer marketing, public relations, stuff that's not in our immediate world, but we know we'll get to down the road. So this is exactly what you want to do with your marketing and advertising. You want to figure out what your goals are. You want to make sure you have measurable ways to see if the advertising is working or not. Even before we had like Domo and all this technology to do it, we had Muhammad. Good old Muhammad was manually tracking everybody that came into our CRM. These people came in with this tag showing they came from Facebook. These people came from Google. Here's how much money we spent on Facebook. Here's all the people that came from Facebook in a month. Here's how much money we made on the people and here's how much money we spent to get those people. I mean, we were manually figuring this out with a $2 an hour person from like India before we even had the ability technology to track it. And it was worth it. So you've got to be able to track what's measurable. Okay, we call this direct response marketing because I can track it. Like I'm spending $1 and in return expecting a response of whatever percentage or proportion that is. And I can track that response, okay, equivalent to how much money I'm spending. So you've got to make sure that you have the ability to track it as well. And Sista says, I love working from home. Use virtual services like stamps.com, Zoom, Skype, eFax, Money Savers. Yeah, exactly. We're the same way, and we find that it works better for us. And I'm sure if you worked in an office, you probably feel the same. Brilliant Davis, hello, thanks for coming in. Carla and Ellie, hey, there's both of you. Carla and Ellie, hey, hello, thanks for coming in from YouTube. So miscellaneous expenses as well, grocery shopping, any of these type of things. Okay, now might not be, if you have an office, you do grocery shopping. And I'll give you an example. I use Shipt. way before COVID, I use Ship to have my groceries delivered. And I tip 20% on the actual groceries. Now, a lot of people will think that's a cost to me. Oh my gosh, you spend 20% tip for somebody to go get your groceries. It's not a tip at all. It's actually equivalent. First of all, if I went into the grocery store, it's like a landmine field for me because I go in to buy like 3 things and leave with 15. I don't know about you. That's how it works in my world. So I spent way more than my 20% tip buying junk I didn't even need just because I was there. Then, not to mention my time that's there. I'm taking time to go in the store and find the stuff and put it in my car. Don't get me wrong. I talk to people that love to shop in grocery stores. I ain't that dude. I'm not that dude. Like, love to shop is not terminology that's for me, right? Like, I shop because I have to, not because I love it. Okay, so if you love to shop, go shop. But if you don't love it, think about how much money you're spending personally and business-wise and going into a place and buying a bunch of stuff that's not what you came in for versus using a service like Shipt, or so many of these places now have, where you could buy online, go pick up the items, or have them deliver it, sometimes at no additional cost, like Walmart. You can just go put your stuff, buy it online. They get it all together. You pull up and they bring it out to you, or places like Shipt where they deliver it to me. It's worth the trade-off for my time, and it's also worth the trade-off of not actually having to be able to go buy a bunch of extra stuff that I wouldn't typically buy. So you've got to really look at what your miscellaneous expenses are and your impulse buying, okay? Because that can really add up. And you got to, again, make everybody accountable for what they're tracking in an app like QuickBooks. So it really comes in and makes sure that those expenses can be looked at, managed, and you can evaluate if they're really needed or not, okay? And poor time management. How long are your meetings? Are they necessary? Do you need to take your team? Okay, a chat program like Slack reduces some of that. So, for example, we're really conscious about how much time our sales team spends in meetings, because every time we take our entire sales team and put them in a meeting, they're not on the phone making sales. So you really have to look at your entire team this way. So our company huddle, our entire company huddle, like everybody at Credit Suite gets together once a week, Monday at 11 o'clock. We have a huddle about everything that's going on. Every division in the company talks about what's going on in their division, what's working. We go over the metrics. We look at all the numbers of the company, revenues, profit. Yes, we openly share the money in the bank account. We share it all with our team. You don't have to, but that's how we roll, okay? So all that is what we do in our company meeting. 15 minutes. That's it. We have a 70-person team, and our whole company huddle takes 15 minutes. So that's what I mean about shorter meetings. Are you really maximizing your team time? I don't need to spend an hour with our entire company explaining what's going on. We get it done in 15 minutes. Say commuting, if they're actually in an office, okay, that takes away time from your team members as well. So again, these are the type of things you have to think about, whereas you're wasting time management, weather conditions, okay? What happens if you lose internet? Okay, so in my internet, I work from home, right? I have 2 internets because there's only 2 in my area. If there was 10, I'd have 10. Literally, if there was 10 people that offered internet service, I'd have service with all 10 of them. I have service with 2. There's 2. There's Frontier and there's, I don't even know, Spectrum. I have 2 routers, one for Frontier and one for Spectrum. Then I have some fancy box that it lights up. I don't know what the thing does, but I'll tell you, it picks up whichever is the best service at any time, and it in real time is switching to that service. So right now, if Frontier went down and I'm on Frontier, my computer automatically switches to Spectrum. And if Spectrum went down, it automatically would switch back to Frontier. Never have I yet had both of them down at the same time. So that's just smart management, right? I don't lose resources if an internet goes down. If your internet goes down, your people stop working, right? I mean, I had an office, the internet goes down, everybody stops working. Well, we can't get online. How much time do you lose there? So doing smart things like having multiple internet providers. I mean, it's $60, $100 to have an internet service provider? Why not spend the $60, $100 to have multiple services? It's $200, $300, I think, for the actual device that actually comes in and switches between the two. So again, these are some things that you want to think about. It's not just good time management, but it's good resource management as well. And Lydia says, best business credit building company. I'm working with a personal credit building company, and they never even answer the phone. Sorry to hear that. When I call them, Credit Suite, call right away, but they call me back in minutes. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, sometimes you're not going to get through to us, but you always see we call back really quickly. I'm so impressed. The educational system is so solid, beyond my expectations. Thank you for being top of the line system for building business credit. Lydia, that means a lot. Like, I really appreciate that. So Lydia's giving me like a real-time testimonial. Thank you, Lydia. That really makes me happy. I really appreciate you to say that. Thank you very much. So, but Lydia actually brings up a good point, is that what she says, hey, look, you might not always answer the phone, but when you don't, somebody calls back within minutes. And here's why. We've built a system where our tier one setters that usually call out and do appointments for our team, if somebody's not called back within 5 minutes, they take the call and they call back. So again, that's just a way that you can maximize your team, is that we said, look, we don't like to miss calls, but when we do, we don't want people to wait to be contacted back. How do we fix that problem? We looked at a whole tier of team member in our company, a tier one sales team, and we said, why don't we have our tier one sales team handle overflow calls? And it's worked very well for us because as you think about it, we make a lot more sales that way. Like calls that wouldn't have got called back for an hour or 2 hours, now we have them come in and save those deals. So again, just more creative ways to be able to save money as well. And Jose, thanks for coming in, buddy. I'm doing well. And Jose says, I got $20,000 with the half. Thank you, brother. That's awesome, man. Congratulations on getting your 20 grand. Jose says, got 2,700 on Crown office supplies. Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. I'm just here to teach, and you're actually executing. So congratulations. Keep it up. Okay. A solid accountant will also help you prevent costly errors. Whether you hire an accountant, whether you have somebody outside your company that's an accountant, whether you use a fractional accounting company, a fractional CFO, fractional bookkeeping, which means they just come in as you need them, okay, it's something you need to do. And that fractional part makes sense. There's a lot of people fractional that you can use. You can use a fractional CFO, a fractional controller, a fractional accountant, a fractional bookkeeper, which just means you're using them when you actually need them. Okay, check your larger bills carefully. Look at them carefully. What are you spending money on? Don't just pay your phone bill. What are you paying on that phone bill? Don't just pay for one service for, like, we use Zendesk as our CRM. What's the breakdown of our cost? You've got to look through those, not only looking for billing errors, but looking for things that you can save as well. So is your business wasting money? Yeah, it is. And you got to stop the bleeding. You got to implement some of these things. We talked about well more than 15, because it really means a lot to your bottom line. And here's what happens. You go from running a business where you stay up at night, not even knowing sometimes if you have enough money to pay payroll, with very little money in the bank, knowing that if something goes wrong, you could be toast, to having a business where you have tons of money in the bank, where people, then it seems like people come out of the blue and want to give you money. Venture capitalists are like, hey, I want to give you money. And you're like, I don't need it. I have my own money. But how do you do that? I'll tell you one of the best tips as we wrap up. Own your margin. Figure out whatever your net margin is and own it. Meaning that if you say, I am going to make 20% profit in this business, you need to cut expenses. You need to do what's needed to get to your 20% and not spend any more money outside of your budget until you know every month that you hit that 20%. That's how we do it in Credit Suite. So we have our net goal. This is not our goal. This is our margin. We live by it. We die by it. And if I go and literally, this literally has happened. Think about it. We do 8 figures in sales, right? And I literally have come in to get justification to spend $500 and was told that if I spent the $500, it would reduce us below our margin threshold, and I didn't do it. Okay, a company that makes millions and millions and millions of dollars, I won't spend $500 because it pushes our margin. We own our margin. We all do. And because I'm like that at the top, everybody in the company is the same way. So pick a margin and own a margin. If you want to net 15%, which means you make $100,000 a year in the business and 15% is your profit, which means 15 grand is your profit in a month and a year, then you own that. You never let yourself get below that. Anything else you think you may need doesn't matter. What matters is hitting that margin. Then if you're over that margin, then you have extra money to spend. And that's how it is. If I went to Megan right now, who's my COO, who oversees our billing accounting team, and I said, Megan, I want to spend an extra $500 this month, she's exactly what she would say to me. She'd say, listen, let me see the margin numbers from last month, and I will tell you if we have that much money to spend. And I will say, okay, thank you. And then she will come back to me and said, I looked at the margin numbers. We're at 22%. We're above where we actually want to be. We've got that money to spend. You can go and spend that money on that thing. That's exactly how we run the business. And it's how you should be running your business as well. If you don't do this, then you are going to suffer from what's called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law controls all of our lives. And what Parkinson's Law basically says is that your actual output, or let me put it this way, your demand is always going to be equal to the supply. Your demand will increase itself to match the supply, which means if I have a supply of money, the demand for money is going to increase to match the supply of money I have. It's the true in your personal life. You know what I'm saying? Have you ever done something to save $1,000 a month personally? And then all of a sudden, like your car broke down and something broke in your house, and that $1,000 you thought, now I can save $1,000 a month. All of a sudden, that $1,000 went up in smoke, and now it's being spent on all kinds of other stuff. That's Parkinson's law. And that's how a business runs. You're like, I saved $2,000 a month. Now I got $2,000 a month in profit. And all of a sudden the business needs $2,000 a month more for other things. That's Parkinson's law. It will always, the demand will always increase to match the supply. So the more money you make, the more the demand for spending money increases. It's just the way that it is. You are the only one that can stop that by setting a margin, owning your margin, not ever veering from that margin, and then only spending what you can to stay under that margin, and then not spending anything above that until you hit your margin. That's how you do it. And if you want to be honest with yourself, you have to stop saying things like, that you're just reinvesting into the growth of the business when you know it's not true. The reality is things are out of control and you don't know why they're out of control. We just went through a lot of reasons why they're out of control and how to fix it. But the best lesson I could say is figure out what your margin is, own the margin, and not spend anything above or below that margin. Until you hit that margin, you don't have extra money to spend. When you make profit above that margin, then you have that extra money to spend. It's some of my best advice that I can actually help you with. Okay. And Anna says, hello, Ty. Hey, thanks for coming in. What's your personal number so that I can get help applying for PPP? Here's our number right here. You can also email me, info@creditsuite.com, 877-600-2487. When you give us a call, we give you a free consultation. We do a fundability assessment to see what's wrong with fundability and what you can improve to become more lendable. We also do a business credit building assessment. We help you get your business credit reports for free. We go over them with you and give you tips and tactics to improve your business credit reports. And we do a funding qualification, tell you all the funding you can qualify for. Right now, much of the funding you might don't even think you can qualify for. And we'll do all of that on a free consultation. If you got value, hit the like button, hit the love button. If you got any actionable information from this, hit the like button, hit the love button. I can see it in real time. And I would expect more of you hit the like and love button than have. It really means a lot to me. And don't forget to like and subscribe on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you're on YouTube, click the bell beside subscribe, select all, so that way you're notified whenever we go live. And don't forget to follow us on our other social channels, creditsuite.com, top right of our page. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, where we have daily tips, YouTube, where we have hundreds of training videos that will help you make more money in your business and get more money for your business. And we also have our podcast, The Business Credit Financing Show, which is nearing 450,000 downloads, 500 plus episodes. We bring in accountants, we bring in marketing specialists, we bring in all these experts and interview them about how to grow a profitable business. That only happens in one format, which is our podcast, and it's available on iTunes, on iHeartRadio, on a bunch of places. You can get to it at the top right of our page, creditsuite.com. Moore says, great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Loopy says, just waiting for my call back. Awesome. Am I on YouTube and Facebook? Jose, you are on YouTube right now. Great content as always. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to wrap up. I look forward to seeing you next week where we talk about more cool ways to make and save money to be able to grow your business. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great